My name is Floyd Matthews. I came down with a parasite infection some time back, and I went to Kaiser about this problem. And the first doctor that I dealt with was a doctor named Bartsfield, I believe his name. And he told me that my stool sample came back negative for parasites, and it was almost impossible to treat a patient for a parasite infection unless they know exactly what type of parasite it was. So he gave me some more stool sample kits and told me to go home, and he said I could drop them off at any Kaiser facility at any lab. So I went home and I filled the next stool sample up with feces, and I went back to Kaiser and I turned it in, and it came up with 0 parasites. And man, I was infested. And so then I decided to sift through my feces on the next test, and I sifted through the feces and I took out only worms, and I put them in the stool sample kit and I turned them in, and it came back negative for parasites. And I could not understand how that would happen. And I did that a couple times, and when I did it a couple times, I set up an appointment with Dr. So Jin Lee, and a woman doctor, and I told her it wasn't possible because I put only parasites, no feces, just parasites, just worms in the, and they told me that it was negative for parasites and I was delusional. I'm going to hold up a bottle with a very large worm in it, as well as some very small ones, to the camera so that you could see it clearly. You could see you could see the worm's tail swimming around. You could see it feeding. You could see the little ones on top of the water. This is what I put in the stool sample kits, and they kept coming back negative for parasites, and they refused to treat me. They refused to give me any medication. I was frustrated with this, and I did not understand what in the world was going on. I'd never had this kind of problem before in my life. So the next time that I went to Kaiser, I took a sandwich bag and I put the water and the worms in a sandwich bag that was clear, and I took it in and I gave it to Dr. So Jin Lee, and I said, "Here, give me a prescription for this parasite. Find out what it is, go on the internet, I don't care. Find out what it is so that I can be treated. I need to know what type of parasite is in my body." At first she refused to take it. She refused to let me take it to the lab, and I raised my voice and I yelled at the woman that I could not properly be treated until this parasite was identified with what type of parasite it was. And since I made such a scene and there were so many patients and staff watching, she told me to take the bag with the worms in it to the lab. And then when I took them to the lab, she told me it would take 8 days for the lab to identify with what type of parasite is. I did not understand that at all. Should be able to just go on the internet, or any lab technician that's used to dealing with parasites should be able to identify with it immediately. So in 8 days I called back to find out what had happened with the lab test, and Dr. Sojin Lee told me over the phone that it was lost in transport. So I continued putting worms in vials, and they kept coming back negative for parasites. And I did not understand what was going on. when I seen Dr. John Kovac, I took this microscope that plugs into a television in with me, and I said to John Kovac, you can plug this into a television and we can videotape parasites that are crawling on my skin. It's 200 magnification. John Kovac told me he refused to look through it. It was a kid's toy. I said, yeah, it may be a kid's toy, but it still magnifies at 200 magnification and you could see the parasites, and he refused. He told me he was not going to. And he refused to let me see another doctor for a second opinion. The next time that I seen a doctor, which my medical records have been sabotaged so many times, I don't even know what is the truth or if this is the real doctor's name that I seen. One second here. Was Dr. John Lodondo. When I told him I was having problems with these lab tests, and that they were complaining that they were telling me that there was no parasites in the stool sample kits that I turned in, the man left the room, and a black woman from membership services came into the room, and she sat down and she looked at me and she said, "Sir, we are not going to let you prove that you have a parasite infection. We are not going to treat you." And I said, "So does that mean that all my lab tests and all my biopsies and all the tests and medical records have been sabotaged?" The woman looked to the ground in shame, and she was blushing, and she couldn't answer the question. When I seen Dr. Elizabeth Cavalier, I took this magnifying glass with me, and I took this UV light that's used to detect counterfeit money. I'm going to turn that on so you can see the light, the UV light in the camera. And from looking in this convex mirror with the UV light, when I turned the lights out, I could see the microscopic parasites crawling on my skin. So it stood to reason that if I took this magnifying glass and held the microscope up, held this UV light up to my skin and turned out the lights, the doctor could see the parasites crawling on my skin. So when I took the magnifying glass and the UV light, Dr. Elizabeth Cavalier, I believe that's her name, she told me that they were sunspots, and I said, no, these are moving around on my face. Keep watching. She turned the lights on. She didn't want to keep watching, and she said, no, this is parasite. This isn't parasites. This is sunspots. I said, no. Keep watching. They're moving. Sunspots don't move around on your face. The next doctor I seen, which is an infectious disease doctor, which was Dr. Holly Kim. She told me that she had spoke with Dr. Elizabeth, and she said that she didn't need to see my skin. I offered to get the magnifying glass and the UV light out of my van. She told me